Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you for those who invited me to be with you this evening, especially when time is so precious during the holidays. So thank you for making the time to come out and have this discussion with me. I'm hoping that through our discussion tonight that you'll be inspired to talk to your friends, your neighbors, and your family about how we can do more in the state of Maryland to truly empower women and families. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. I'd like to go through these slides. I may pick and choose for the sake of time, and then I believe we'll have some time after for some questions and answers. And I'm hoping that my presentation will inspire you to ask some really good questions. We really need to have an honest discussion about these matters, and we'll all be better for it. So I invite challenging questions and always appreciate your encouragement. So again, as Lori said, I am Laura Bogley. I am the Legislative Director for Maryland Right to Life. And as you know, Maryland Right to Life has been the leading voice on life in Maryland for nearly 50 years. So just a little bit about me. I'm here with my Director of Administration, Julie Biasotti, who is the one that usually makes sure that I am not running over my time. So I'm sure you all will be very thrilled that Julie's here with us tonight. Thank you, Julie. So this is some of our work at the Supreme Court. We've been battling this for a very long time. So in the upper right, you see that's myself in the upper right corner. Probably circa 1979, I'm thinking. I'm probably about 9 or 10 there. So 1979, 1980, with my older sister, who was very proud of her artwork with the poster that she drew for the National March for Life. My father actually had the opportunity to be the Master of Ceremonies for the National March for Life as a Democrat, when the Democrat Party still supported life. So we had quite a few pro-life Democrats at the time. We still have a few really hanging on, and I hope in the future we'll have many more. So that's my sister and I in 1979, and then Julie and I here this past month at the Supreme Court steps for the hearings of Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health, which is the case out of Mississippi, which is a 15-week abortion ban. And when we asked questions about why 15 weeks, the answer was that science now establishes that at 15 weeks in utero, the child's neurological system is fully intact. And that is what indicates to scientists and doctors that they can, in fact, feel the pain of their abortion. So this was a humane bill saying that we want what in Maryland we call pain-capable bill, which is when the child's capable of feeling pain, then the interest of the state in preventing that pain for the child becomes more important in the state's perspective. So we were there with friends, many wonderful friends and other national organizations that were there fighting for the lives of the preborn. And then just a picture from the previous year, or 2 years ago, because last year, the National March for Life, because of COVID, was scaled down quite a bit. So first I want to say that anytime I talk with a group, I want to respect the fact that so many people's lives have been touched by abortion. If we have not experienced abortion ourselves, we have a loved one, close friend, or family member who has. In fact, 1 in 4 women will go through an abortion by the time she's the age 40. So this isn't someone else's problem. This is all of our problems. And as a society, we can do much better to support these women to make good choices. So we just want to make sure people are aware, and I put the numbers up on the screen, but I'll give these slides also to the organization here so they can share these numbers with you. But whether it's, daughters, granddaughters, friends, someone that you know needs this information. So I really encourage you, if you can take notes, if you can write it down, or if you have a phone that you like to use, if you know how to take photos with your phone. I used to work for Verizon, so we love the cell phones. You can take a picture of the numbers here and share that. So Project Rachel is a group that is through the Archdiocese, works with the Archdiocese, and they do a lot of counseling, post-abortion counseling for women and girls. Because what we know is that women are experiencing at high levels post-abortion syndrome, ongoing, lifelong depression, because they're not getting the support they need to work through their past abortions. So Project Rachel does a wonderful job. You have a local group right here close to you. That is the direct number for Amy, who is the Project Rachel coordinator for Baltimore, and her direct cell phone number. That's her private cell phone number, her email, and the website to get more information. But again, I'll share these with you. So just, I want to encourage you, if you've been through this, and I know it's a difficult subject, just to stay with us through this. Because especially if you've been through an abortion, you know that we can do better. You know that the support systems that you may have needed were not there in place. So, and many of our abortion survivors are our leaders now in the pro-life movement. So one that I work with, which is Dr. LBK King, has her own organization dealing with survivors of abortion to help them get through the post-traumatic trauma that they experience. So she's a very inspired pro-life leader after having 2 of her own abortions. So I want you to meet the co-founder of the National Right to Life Committee, Dr. Mildred Jefferson. She was the first African-American woman to graduate from the Harvard Medical School. Fantastic, inspirational leader, especially to feminists. If you have any feminists in the group, she absolutely embraced the right to life and inspired a lot of the policies that our organization still follows today. So just a little note about National Right to Life. We are the largest national pro-life organization. We have more than 3,000 chapters nationwide, and we've identified more than 20 million pro-life households in the United States. These are people that follow us, that rely on the information that we provide. So Maryland Right to Life is, of course, an affiliate of National Right to Life. The mission of Maryland Right to Life is to protect all innocent human life from fertilization until natural death. So that's quite a large scope. We cover a lot of issue areas, so I'm happy to have the time with you tonight. I hope that you'll invite me back and we'll talk about some other issues. I believe today we're going to be talking specifically about the pro-life issue, and that next month they may be scheduling to talk about physician-assisted suicide, which would be a particularly critical issue at this time in Maryland. So the main purposes of our organization are to provide education and outreach, legislative advocacy, which is what I call it, otherwise known as lobbying, and political action. So we also have a political action committee that surveys elected officials for their positions on abortion and issues legislative scorecards and possibly endorsements. So if they've been doing the good work, they may receive an endorsement, which most of them do value. The critical issues that we deal with in that scope from conception until natural death include abortion, infanticide, which is still happening here in the state of Maryland. It is still happening. Euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, which is can lead to a form of involuntary euthanasia. Healthcare rationing, which we've all seen with COVID. The crisis standard of care went into place where loved ones couldn't even have access to their loved ones in hospitals suffering from COVID. We didn't have the ability to advocate for them medically as we otherwise would have done. So we see how having that quality standard medical care in place is so important. Conscience clause violations. This is for healthcare workers and other companies, maybe they're Christian or faith-based organizations that do not believe in euthanasia or abortion, may not support a government policy, and if they're mandated to participate, it's actually violating their constitutional rights, which includes their rights of conscience. So we usually try to legislate conscience clause protections for healthcare workers into policies and can be successful at varying degrees. So it's important to keep an eye on that. And religious liberty, of course. You do not have to be a person of faith to be pro-life, but if you are a person of faith, you must be pro-life. So we want to protect those religious liberties for employers, again for workers, and for everyday citizens. And we'll get to that a little bit later, because you ask, how are my rights being violated as a citizen with the abortion issue? So the United States is extreme on the issue of abortion. We're one of only 6 countries on the entire globe that permits abortion through the point of birth. One of only 6. So we're in bad company with China, North Korea, Vietnam. These are primary violators of human rights across the globe, and we stand side by side with them on the issue of abortion. So in the United States, since 1973, you've probably all heard this number. This number is increasing in increments of 1 million deaths each year. So this year, we're saying the estimated number of children whose lives were ended through abortion, legal abortion, since 1973 is 63 million, which is more than all the world wars combined, the number of fatalities. 65% of Americans who were polled through the Associated Press want abortion restricted in the second trimester. So the vast majority want no abortions in third trimester. They don't want any late-term abortions. 26 countries ban all abortions, meaning it's completely prohibited, as it was in the United States prior to 1973. All 50 states had abortion restrictions, and 46 states, including Maryland, had a criminal ban on abortion. Abortion was considered a crime against the person. 77 countries banned abortions except to save the life of the mother. And this is an important point that I spent a lot of time talking to state lawmakers about. With advances in science, we no longer say that it is necessary to end the life of a child to save the life of the mother. There are very rare circumstances where a physician will have to physically remove the child early to save the life of the mother in rare circumstances. But the physician, because he has taken that Hippocratic oath to first do no harm, makes every effort to save the life of that child. So an abortion is a purposeful termination of the life of that child. So we do have early removal for children, again, and they're provided every opportunity to survive in that case. And that's usually, in the rare cases where a mother does need to go into early labor, she's already in the third trimester and she's past the point of viability where the child can survive on his or her own, which now medically, we're seeing as early as 22 weeks because of medical advances. So at the time of Roe v. Wade in 1973, we were talking about 28 weeks. 28 weeks. So we're nearly 2 months earlier that science can now save children born early. And as I said, six countries, including the United States, allow abortion through birth. So state restrictions. You probably all are interested in a lot of the things going on in the news right now are the cases coming from other states that are making their way through the Supreme Court. That's exciting for us because most of the cases are killed at the federal court level, the lower level federal court level. They don't make it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't agree to hear a lot of cases. So we're excited that we've had a couple of cases either survive lower federal court challenge or be appealed up to the United States Supreme Court. But in fact, there were 600 pro-life bills introduced by states this year. The state legislatures introduced bills like Maryland, we do that. We introduce pro-life bills every year. This past year, I think there were 9 pro-life bills introduced by state lawmakers. They weren't all at our request. Many of the lawmakers just have it on their heart to introduce these bills, or their constituents ask them to introduce these bills. Last year, we had 11 pro-life bills introduced in Maryland. You never hear about it because they're never brought to a vote, but they're not defeated either. They just get stuck in a drawer and ignored. So for those of us that are pro-life citizens, we're really being deprived our due process rights because we elect pro-life legislators to represent us, and then their bills are just stuck in a drawer and ignored. So we're not getting full representation. But 600 pieces of pro-life legislation were introduced this year by states. So we hear a lot about Texas and Mississippi, but a lot of the states are doing this, which goes to show you that Roe v. Wade has never been settled law. It is the most highly contested act of judicial activism in our nation's history. That's why you're seeing so many challenges. That's why you see so many states saying to the courts, this is not a workable standard for us in our state. This doesn't make any sense to us. We want to protect babies that can feel pain. We want to protect babies who have beating hearts, that we can detect their beating hearts. And so 50 states, as I said, had abortion bans, and many of them still have abortion bans on the books today. but they've been enjoined or blocked by the federal courts who have said, you don't have a right as a state to decide what your interest in prenatal life is. So we were talking again about the cases that have come up before the Supreme Court. The two big ones are the case out of Mississippi, which is the 15-week abortion ban, and the case out of Texas, which is a 6-week abortion ban. The case out of Mississippi that I mentioned before, Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health, was the one that we were there in the Supreme Court supporting. We were actually successful, Maryland Right to Life was successful in securing the signatures of several Maryland legislators who wrote a friend of the court brief or signed a friend of the court brief to the Supreme Court saying, we support Mississippi's right to decide when they are going to actively defend fetal human life. And we had several send that in. We don't expect a decision on the Mississippi case until possibly as late as June. But now with what we're seeing is really, we had a 6-3 conservative majority now on the court, but typically Justice Roberts votes with the liberal conservatives, so it usually comes out in about a 5-4 balance. So if we can get the 5 to allow Mississippi's abortion ban to stand, that'll have a significant impact on the standard that we currently discuss, which is the viability standard. Because under the federal precedents, they don't allow the states to protect the life of the unborn child any earlier than that viability standard, which, like we said, now it was once at 28 weeks. So now it's much earlier, and they're not really allowing the states to address the scientific advances. So what this would do is question the standard of viability, which has always really been an arbitrary line in the sand. When do we care about the potential life of the child, which that's what the court's language was, but we know the child's already living from the moment of conception. But when does the state's interest in the life of the child outweigh the right of a woman, or the privacy right of the woman? And the states all have different ideas about when that is, but most of them do not agree with the viability standard. And so this case is giving the Supreme Court the opportunity to review on the merits whether states can restrict abortion prior to what they're saying is 23, 24 weeks. And what effect does that have in real life operation? You know, we talk about, okay, well, how many women really choose abortion? We already know 1 in 4. But more importantly, in real world application, it affects things like a friend that we had that called us this past week. And she was calling in support of a woman in Maryland, a pregnant mother, who was going into preterm labor. And the child was, at that point, she was 22 weeks and 5 days pregnant. Because of the viability standard, insurance companies won't pay to help a child who's born early survive outside of his mother's womb if that child is even 1 day shy of the 23-week viability standard. So when that child is born in preterm labor before 23 weeks, most hospitals are legally justified to just hand the baby over in a blanket to the mother, and the mother's supposed to hold the baby until the baby dies. But we know that there is medical technology that is helping these babies live. Again, you know, babies as early as 22 weeks, this baby was 22 weeks and 5 days. But this is the effect that these policies have, even on mothers who want their child, who desperately want that medical help. You know, and you know, you're in Maryland, we have one of the best healthcare systems in the country. Here in Maryland, we have people with the technology. Not only would they not provide those life-sustaining care for her child, they also would not allow her to transfer to another hospital who would be willing to. This sounds like what we hear in Britain, United Kingdom, not in America, but it's happening every week. It's happening every day to families. That's why these policies matter. And it should be the voters in each state that have the power to say what they believe through their elected representatives. Now, the Texas Heartbeat Act is another one you've heard a lot about. That's the 6-week ban, because at 6 weeks, what they're saying, that's not when the baby's heart begins. That's when a baby's heart is complete at 6 weeks. So what they're saying, it's a fully functioning, beating human heart at 6 weeks. And the state of Texas said, that is when we believe the child's rights outweigh the mother's rights. That's what the people of Texas believe. They've said that through their elected representatives. and they decide whether or not they agree with them through elections. That's the way our lawmaking process works, not by having courts issue edicts, like the Supreme Court did in 1973. So they said 6 weeks when a heartbeat is detected, that is when we want to protect the preborn, and a lower federal court upheld it, which is very rare. We have 2 heartbeat bills introduced in Maryland every year. We've had legislators introduce heartbeat bills. But they wouldn't survive a federal court challenge in our district. But the federal Fifth Circuit did uphold it. And so that's why now the Supreme Court has an opportunity to really consider, does Texas, do the voters in Texas have the right to determine whether they have an interest in the life of the child once that child's heart is detectable? We think they do. So this gets a little heavy. I won't go through this whole thing, but people want to know, where do we stand in Maryland? Maryland Right to Life has definitely had a challenge since 1991, when the Maryland legislature enacted a Freedom of Choice Act. So we've heard all about these, equal rights in the amendments, freedom of choice acts, all of those things you hear at the congressional level. But you don't really know all of specifically what happens at the state level. So in 1991, the legislature passed the Freedom of Choice Act. Now, there are a lot of good things in equality acts and freedom acts, but they contain a lot of abortion pork. Guaranteed public funding for abortion. And that's essentially what happened in 1991 in Maryland. So there are a lot of laws, we heard a lot about New York a couple of years ago, their radical abortion bill. We've had that bill since 1991. So comparatively speaking, we're right there with New York, but we were there before they were, which is not a title or that we want. That's not something we want. So just go through this really quickly. Are late-term abortions legal through birth in Maryland? Yes. Partial birth abortion? Yes. Dismemberment abortion? Yes. Public fundings of abortions? Yes. Maryland is one of only 4 states in the entire nation that compels their taxpayers to fund abortion. Only 4. This isn't common sense. This isn't an entitlement. Most of the other states say, no, we don't believe it's an entitlement. And the Supreme Court has said, we agree with you. A woman may have a right to an abortion, but she does not have a right to public funding. Religious freedom protection, that's mixed. Again, so let's say a nurse does not want to commit an abortion or participate in abortion. So she has the right to say, I don't want to participate. But what this law is saying is, if something happens to that woman, if she dies or she's injured because she was denied this abortion, then there's no legal protection for that nurse. That nurse can be sued. And in the state of Maryland, because of the broad definition of health involved in abortion law, a woman's health can be depression. They can say she was harmed, she was depressed because she couldn't get an abortion performed that day. And she could sue the nurse for affecting her mental health. So it can get quite extensive, but it creates uncertainty in the medical community. And a lot of people who object to abortion feel compelled into performing abortions, just to save their jobs and their livelihood. Born alive protections, we have them here in Maryland, but they're ineffective because it's the honor system for the abortionists. No one else is there except the abortionist to say whether or not that child, if born alive, a failed abortion attempt, if that baby is born alive, the abortionist is supposed to provide life-sustaining care. But we know from abortion clinic workers that those babies are often wrapped up in a towel, suffocated, or left to freeze and die without the medical care. So it's not being enforced, and that's the Maryland Department of Health. A pain-capable ban. We've tried to introduce this several times in the state of Maryland, working with pro-life legislators, and it never gets a vote. It's not defeated, they just deprive it of a vote. So pain-capable, as we said before, when we know that that child's nervous system is fully developed and can fully feel the pain of their abortion, which is why physicians like our wonderful Ben Carson out of Baltimore said that when they do any type of surgery prenatally, they give that child anesthesia because they know that child can feel the pain. And the babies that receive anesthesia during any type of prenatal procedure heal much faster. Informed consent, this is so important. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, We should all be able to agree that a woman cannot make a choice unless she's fully informed. So we introduce bills every year, and in fact, on most bills that we have introduced contain informed consent clauses. We try to get this into all of the bills that we support. Just saying that the woman has the right to know. She has the right to know what the risks of the procedure are. If I go in and I get Botox, the physician is supposed to tell me what the risk of that procedure is. But if I went in to get an abortion, the physician is not required to tell me what the risks of the abortion are. In fact, the abortionists don't typically speak to the girls and women when they go in for abortions. So they're not finding out a number of things they should be finding out about the girl's or the woman's health to know whether or not they're even qualified for a particular type of procedure. But there's so many different ways, especially with the psychological aspects, where we know women are not receiving choice. They're not receiving information to make an informed choice. I think this is why so many are affected by post-traumatic abortion syndrome, because they don't really understand the actions that they're taking. They're in a desperate, difficult situation, and they may make a rash decision. We're learning now that up to 73% of women say they felt coerced in some way to have their abortion. It wasn't choice. It was a boyfriend, a spouse, a parent, or often clinic workers, where they wanted to leave, they weren't sure, they went in for information. In the Maryland Department of Health, if someone requests assistance with prenatal care, we'll refer them to abortion clinics. Those abortion clinics are not interested in providing prenatal care. They're interested in selling abortions. And in fact, prenatal care is only 2% of what Planned Parenthood clinics do. And that number is steadily decreasing. Planned Parenthood gives an annual report every year. And I'll show you that a little bit later on, where they're showing how drastically their numbers of prenatal care and adoption referrals have come down. So abortion's way up. That's what they do. That's what they profit from. Adoption and prenatal care, not so important to them. Parental consent. This is so important. If you have loved ones, if you have, again, children or grandchildren, great-grandchildren even, who are in a public school system or really any type of community environment, the Maryland legislature just passed a bill last year to decrease the age of consent for mental health treatment from 16 years of age to 12. So now 12-year-old children can be convinced to do any number or receive any number of medical treatments, including receiving puberty-blocking chemicals for gender reassignment. So that's a new business area that Planned Parenthood and NARAL have gotten into now that they're very interested in. And in order to do that, they needed to legally change that age of consent to 12, because they have to give puberty blockers before puberty, right? So your grandchild, your great-grandchild, as young as 12, can receive medical treatment without their parents' knowledge or consent. In the state of Maryland, we passed a parental consent law for abortion. And it does say that the abortionist needs to receive the consent of the parent if the child is under 16 and comes in to receive an abortion. But there's a huge legal loophole, and it says, but we'll leave it to the discretion of the abortionist if they think it's in the best interest of this minor to not tell her parents. And of course, in most cases, a scared 15-year-old or younger who's coming in for an abortion doesn't feel that she can talk to her parents about this matter. So that's a real concern in our law. Fetal heartbeat, again, we've introduced bills for blocking or restricting abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected, and they have not been voted on. Fetal homicide is mixed. We had a bill that was passed a couple of years ago called Laura and Reed's Law. There was a woman, a young woman, her name was Laura. She was pregnant, and she was killed by her boyfriend when she refused to have an abortion. But in doing so, he also killed his preborn son, Reed. The family had named his mother, Laura, had already picked out his name, Reed. She loved this child. And what the legislature decided was, yes, they wanted to give extra protections for someone like Laura. So they increased the amount or the term of the sentence for someone who knowingly kills a pregnant woman. But they did so without ever recognizing the personhood of Reed. They would never recognize the humanity of Reed. Other states, most states do. So that's what we could call penal homicide laws. When a preborn child dies, and the mother may survive. You know, oftentimes we see this with vehicular accidents, and a preborn child is killed. But if it's someone who is drinking and driving, that kind of thing, they can be charged. State constitutional right to abortion. This is a complicated issue, but as I said, Roe v. Wade is not the law of the land. The Constitution of the United States is the law of the land. And in places like Maryland, our state constitution says we recognize the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then they go into what all of those things mean. But they also defer to the United States Constitution, and it says where the state constitution doesn't speak on an issue, they defer to the federal constitution. And we know the federal constitution and the Declaration of Independence also guarantee the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And they say that that right is unalienable. They're saying that right is not given to us by government. It comes from nature or from God if you're a person of faith. And therefore, the government can't grant the right to life. So the government doesn't have the authority to take life. That's what the founders believed. They didn't know that it was going to have to apply to the abortion issue because they didn't think that women would be clamoring to end the lives of their preborn child at the numbers that they are in our country today. So in the state of Maryland, what we've seen across the country actually is that the abortion industry is afraid that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned, and it looks like it's likely that it will be severely weakened if not overturned. So what they're doing is they're trying to shore up a right to abortion, a constitutional right to abortion, in each of the states. They did this in Maryland in 2020. They introduced a bill to establish a constitutional right of privacy in the Maryland state constitution. Now, the abortion industry had most of the legislators, even the pro-life legislators, fooled. They said, this is just a privacy bill. This is about data breaches. You've heard about identity theft, right? You don't want identity theft. We've got to pass this bill so people can't steal your identity, so we can't have data fraud. But they were lying. They were lying, and they knew they were lying, because the basis of the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade was a constitutional right to privacy. The Maryland Court of Appeals also had already upheld that a constitutional right to privacy, the type of privacy you find in a constitution, is broad enough to include a woman's right to have an abortion. The law already cited, but the state legislators were so ill-informed that they were confused. Only 2 state legislators helped Maryland Right to Life defeat this bill. And we did it through the strength of the grassroots community. We had churches, we had community people, we had friends bring friends, we had over 150 just everyday citizens come out and say, we support the right to life in our state constitution, and we're going to fight to protect it. Now we're hearing that they are still targeting our state constitution this year. We'd love any support we can get from citizens to contact your legislators and let them know you do in fact support the state constitution, and that that right to life in our constitutions is inalienable. And irregardless of what Justice Sotomayor said, and the litigants in the Dobbs case said, they keep referring to a liberty clause. They forgot to mention the liberty clause starts with life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But we didn't forget that. Taxpayer funding for abortion. We've all heard about Henry Hyde and the Hyde Amendment. Wasn't that wonderful when Congressman Henry Hyde first introduced language to say, look, if you want all of these great programs providing services for women and family, that's fantastic. We support it, but you've got to get the abortion pork out of it. So we're going to attach amendment language to all of these pieces of legislation that says, sure, we'll support prenatal care. We'll support early education. We'll support all sorts of things to support women's health, as long as you do not use federal taxpayer funds to pay for abortions, because they know how divided this country is on this issue. We do not have Hyde-style amendment protections in the state of Maryland, and we do fund the abortion industry to the tune of millions. We don't know because a lot of that is passed through funding through the Department of Health and Department of Education. The only numbers that we see are when these abortionists file for reimbursement for the abortions they commit through state Medicaid. So each year they report those numbers so they can get paid. And in 2020, the number that they reported was $6.5 million for nearly 10,000 abortions, 9,864 taxpayer-funded abortions, and 0 of those were done for reasons of rape, incest, or life of the mother. The public doesn't support that. The public doesn't support public funding for elective abortion. A smaller subset support funding for saving the life of the mother. 0 of the cases we paid for this year was to save the life of the mother. And that is the abortionists reporting themselves. That's not conjecture. So nationally, we know that Planned Parenthood, which is the largest provider of abortions in this country, they perform 41% of the abortions in this country. They receive $618 million from taxpayers. We're paying them. They are a $2 billion abortion industry, and they still have a nonprofit classification. All nonprofit means is that the majority of your funds come from the public. So this is just through taxpayer funds and grants and the reimbursements that I mentioned to you. So it's all part of the plan. So one of the things that we know is they're using this taxpayer money for their political action. You don't need to get too involved in this map, but it explains a lot. You know, why has abortion remained legal with all the public challenges and all of the division that we've experienced as a nation since it was passed in 1973? And the answer is because abortion is lucrative. Abortion is very lucrative. And so this is the number that you see here, which is pass-through funding. We call it fungibility. So the money that Planned Parenthood gets from taxpayers, which is supposed to support their prenatal care services, which now we know are 2%, their family planning services, which are nil, and their adoption referrals, which we have had previous employees of Planned Parenthood said the few times that they did refer to people for adoption support, they had a partner who would just redirect them back to abortion and say, well, we hear you, but we think you'd really be better off getting an abortion. So it was a cyclical thing. They wanted to just sell more abortions. And if you're interested, we can, you'll see in the breakdown the percentage of how many abortions they do for each adoption referral. So the exact number from their last report was that Planned Parenthood spent over $150 million on public policy. Guess what? That's what I do. Lobbyists, $150 million. You wonder why these Congress members are so bloodthirsty. Why do they keep pushing more and more abortion? We don't have an abortion access problem. We have a problem with not having enough access to alternatives to abortion, life-saving care. And I can tell you as a pro-life lobbyist, the only registered pro-life lobbyist in the state of Maryland, the reason we don't have those life-saving alternatives for mothers is because every time we introduce a bill to give women informed choice or to give them quality prenatal care, to reform foster care, or to promote affordable adoption programs, the first ones that oppose the bill are NARAL and Planned Parenthood. They don't want women to have other options. They don't want women to have choice. That's the problem. And what we see with a lot of women who have, they talk a little bit, the state's a little bit concerned about maternal mortality. What they don't tell you is that a lot of women, especially women of color, who have a disparate impact in terms of preterm births, pregnancy complications, it's because they're not receiving quality prenatal care. The abortion industry won't allow them to receive that. So they just passed a bill in Maryland. It sounded fantastic. It was a bill about prenatal care grants. So we want to expand those who are eligible for prenatal care grants. So it used to go, all the state-funded prenatal care used to go through our county health departments. People that know who the good providers of prenatal care who are in the county. But they just passed a law to say, we're going to open that up to hospitals and other providers of prenatal care to get state-funded prenatal care grants. Well, we know who says they're a provider of prenatal care, Planned Parenthood. But we know that only 14% of their centers nationwide provide any type of prenatal care. Like even prenatal vitamins. They won't let you see an ultrasound for prenatal care. They only use ultrasounds when they're performing abortions. So we have to be very careful that some of the language of the bills, the bills are going to do what they promise they're going to do. And we need to make sure that women are getting more choices, not less. And that's just abortion money in politics. So this is what I want people to understand. Some people have this idea that Planned Parenthood is also doing a lot of good work. And I think there's a lot of people who support Planned Parenthood thinking that they are providing prenatal care and they're doing all this great work for people. But this is the reality, and again, you'll get this packet so you can see these numbers because it's a little data intensive. But you'll see that their breast cancer exams are down 64%. Their Pap tests are down 65%. Their prenatal care services are down 73%. But their the number of abortions they commit is up by 8%. And the profits are up by 277%. Does it sound like Planned Parenthood really needs our taxpayer funds? Shouldn't we be giving those to quality prenatal care providers that are going to help women survive and have full-term births? Wouldn't it be better to reform our foster care program that we know in the Baltimore area is very, very troubled? Wouldn't it be great if we had a domestic adoption program again? We have 1 million families waiting to adopt children. 1 million families, but there aren't babies to adopt because they're being killed. So these women are not being given real options. And I think it's also important to mention, because I feel very strongly that abortion is the human and civil rights issue of our time. And recently, Planned Parenthood tried to distance itself from its founder, Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist. She believed that certain people were unfit to reproduce. And she subscribed forced sterilization for that. But the people that followed in her footsteps said, well, why stop at forced sterilization? Abortion is so much more lucrative. So even Alan Guttmacher, who ran the Guttmacher Institute, that we still go to get a lot of the abortion data, because the abortionists talk to each other. They know how many abortions they're committing, but they're not telling us. In Maryland, we're one of 3 states that shields abortionists. It doesn't require them to report the number of abortions they commit and the reasons why. So we can't really enforce our laws. And we don't really know how well we're doing providing services to pregnant women because we don't have those numbers. But Margaret Sanger was a known eugenicist. And Planned Parenthood today still is having a eugenistic or genocidal effect, because 78% of abortion clinics are still located in minority communities. And Annapolis, all the time in Annapolis, when I'm working on these bills, the legislators keep telling me, Black women need abortion. Black women need to kill their children. That's a lie. That's a lie. And it started here with Margaret Sanger, and it hasn't ended, and it needs to end. So this is another one which, it's very hard to have inject any kind of comedy in this kind of discussion because it's so critical. But this, I love political cartoons. And this one's apolitical, but it's still entertaining. The woman says, I can't say, how can Planned Parenthood be so heartless? Specifically a pro-lifer. And it looks like their former chair, Cecile Richards, president of Planned Parenthood, saying, heartless? Are you kidding? We have plenty of hearts. And then someone in the background going, we take Visa, MasterCard, and of course, Diners Club. So the reason I thought this was relevant is because a couple of years ago, there was a group called Centers for Medical Progress, and they did an undercover investigation. And they revealed countless pieces of evidence where Planned Parenthood abortionists were benefiting financially from harvesting fetal organs and tissue for research. That's against the law. But Kamala Harris, who is now our vice president, and Becerra, who now they're leading our national government, they prosecuted the journalist that uncovered this crime instead of prosecuting the abortionist that sold fetal body parts. So this is a lighthearted look at it, but it's really a travesty. And in Maryland, this is a big issue for us because fetal organ harvesting is big business in Maryland because we have so many federal biomedical research facilities here like NIH. There's money in it. And what I'd like you all to understand is that Maryland established a stem cell program many years ago, and we fund it by millions of dollars each year. There's no prohibition in that Maryland project against using fetal stem cells. But what you should know, and doctors say this universally, there's no question about this, that no disease has been cured by the use of fetal stem cells in the last 50 years since they've been in research. Not one disease has been cured. They're used for all sorts of testing, but not one disease has been cured. And we find out, and perhaps it's divine or otherwise, but oftentimes when people take therapies using fetal stem cells, their bodies reject them. And they reject them because it's foreign DNA. You're receiving the DNA of another human being. It doesn't match with your DNA, so your body's not likely to accept it, and they often don't. So we need to be wary of that again as voters and taxpayers. These things sound so great when the legislators pass them, but you need to ask the next question. Are we funding fetal tissue harvesting? Is the state buying fetal organs? And I want to tell you, when we had the slide up before about partial birth abortion, I told you I would come back to that, why that's so important. This is a very upsetting topic, but there's actually a procedure called a water bag abortion. And this is happening in Maryland, it's happening in Baltimore, where they deliver a baby. A mother comes in for an abortion, she signs an agreement to say she'll give her baby for research. And they have the baby born, removed from his or her mother, in the amniotic sac. They transfer the baby in the amniotic sac to NIH or other places to then be dissected for research. They do this because they know the organs don't have a long shelf life. So the longer they can keep that baby alive before they dissect it, the more useful the baby's organs are to them. So they're actually, when we talk about infanticide, people say it's a conspiracy theory. No, it's just a matter of biomedical research in Maryland. Planned Parenthood in our schools, again, you all probably have loved ones. There was definitely a need. I think when parents sent their children to public school, they were relying on the schools, the teachers, the nurses, to tell their kids about the birds and the bees. Who wants to do that, right? That's no fun. I have 3 boys. They don't want to hear the birds and the bees from their mother. So a lot of parents, I think it was an uncomfortable topic. There were probably some religious inhibitions for parents to talk to their children about sex and human reproduction. They just allowed the schools to do it. But until recently, the parents weren't really paying attention to how the schools were educating our children on sexual reproductive health. And what we're finding out is very disturbing. So Planned Parenthood controls a lot of this curriculum. They do it through various shell organizations. One that they use a lot in Maryland is called Advocates for Youth. And they have worked on the boards for the school-based health centers. So they determine the policy for what the school nurses can do. So in the state of Maryland, Planned Parenthood curriculum starts in kindergarten. They're already influencing our children in kindergarten. Is it any wonder that most of us that go through the public school system start out as pro-choice? We hear that from a lot of our supporters in the pro-life movement. Well, of course I was pro-life when I was 18, I went to public schools. But now the private schools really aren't that much better. But through the school-based health centers, which are mostly located in minority districts, the school nurses are already providing birth control, not just oral, but implanting birth control during the school day, giving abortion counseling, abortion referrals, and even transportation to abortion clinics during the school day when they're supposed to be learning academic subjects. They're being driven to abortion providers during the school day. All of this without parents' knowledge or consent. Remember I told you about that consent law in Maryland and how it's really not implemented because it's at the abortionist's discretion? That's how it plays out. Your daughter, your granddaughter can go to school. She's supposed to be learning algebra. No, but she got an abortion today, and you'll never be the wiser for it unless she has a medical crisis. And I really want you all to know about this because there's a recent change, and we're going to see a lot more medical crises for people that we love. And that is the chemical abortion pill. So the chemical abortion pill, and I'll give you a hotline number for this later, and I really want you to write this down. This isn't the morning after pill. It's basically a stronger version of that. It's a two pill system, 2-day system. The first day, they give you a pill to basically starve your fetus of any nutrients. The second day, they give you a pill to cause extreme hemorrhaging, so you'll flush your baby out of your system. So remember in 1973, everything was about making abortion legal so it could be safe, legal, and rare, right? We didn't want all those back alley abortions, which were overinflated. The founder of NARAL has told us, Bernard Nathanson told us he made up those numbers. There weren't thousands of women killing themselves through back alley style abortions. That's what I heard growing up. Probably many of you did too. But the abortion industry is returning women and girls to back alley style abortions because they're going home, being sent home alone to bleed without even having a physician's exam. And what we're finding now is chemical abortion pills are several times more dangerous than surgical abortions. At first we thought it was 4 times more dangerous. But now we're seeing the number of complaints are more than 200% increase in complications. And the problem is the abortionist just washes his hands of the woman or girl when she has the complications. He doesn't answer her calls, so he says go to the ER. The ER is not trained to provide for these things. They don't report it as chemical abortion related injury or death. They just say hemorrhaging, they say infection. But what's happening is because the women are being deprived of physician's exam, the Biden administration recently removed Food and Drug Administration safeguards that said women and girls can't get the chemical abortion pill unless they've had a physician's exam. Because there's several underlying medical conditions that can make you not eligible for a chemical abortion. It's unsafe for you. And one is the gestational age of your baby because it's only recommended by the FDA for 10 weeks and earlier. But if these providers aren't even verifying how far along you are, a girl could be sent home with chemical abortion pills for a full-term baby. She's not going to be able to pass her baby that way. The only way to remove a full-term baby is to dismember that baby before removing them from the mother's uterus. So you can see the situation. These women are going home being alone without support, and we've already seen 24 deaths of women in these new back alley style abortions. Why are they doing it? Why? Because doctors won't commit abortions. 9 out of 10 doctors will not commit abortions because they realize there are 2 patients, a mother and a child. It's science, it's basic biology, and doctors know this. That's why 9 out of 10 doctors will not commit abortions. The only way the abortion industry can survive is to diversify by getting into gender reassignment and puberty blockers and by going to chemical abortions, which they can send in the mail. Don't even need to see a doctor, they can send it in the mail to you. And we need to be careful of this because soon they'll be able to distribute them in school-based health centers. So now your daughter can get chemical abortion pills, your granddaughter can get chemical abortion pills during the school day without your knowledge or consent. And I hope you're checking on them because they may not ask for your help and they could get into a medical crisis. Very serious issue. So we just want you to know that women have real choices. They want you to believe that we only can go to Planned Parenthood. No one else is helping these women. That's not true. You see, here in the state of Maryland, there are 132 better healthcare alternatives for women than the 9 Planned Parenthood locations. And I think it's up to 14 Planned Parenthood locations now. But this is federally qualified health centers that provide several more services for women than Planned Parenthood does, but not abortions. This is kind of a small chart, hard for you to see, but if you see on the left column, those are the only services that Planned Parenthood provides. The right column is all of the services that federally qualified health centers provide. Many more services for women. And the end goal is not to terminate your pregnancy. So I want to share this information with you. Again, I'll make sure you have the slides, but this is our emergency outreach line. If you or someone you know is having problems with an unexpected pregnancy, these people will help you confidentially for free 24 hours a day. So this is the important number, the option line. CareNet is also a network of pro-life pregnancy centers. And there are 2 pro-life pregnancy centers in Maryland for every 1 Planned Parenthood clinic. The Department of Health doesn't tell women this when they go on the Department of Health website to get help with prenatal care or pregnancy planning. They just get sent to Planned Parenthood. Two pregnancy centers for every Planned Parenthood clinic. And women and girls don't know. But CareNet can help. So if you know anyone that's going through an unplanned pregnancy, please call CareNet for them or contact CareNet for them. They can tell you what the center is closest to you. You have 2 right here within a 4-mile radius. And I provided that information. 2 wonderful pro-life pregnancy centers that can help anyone you know experience pro-life pregnancy. And as I said, this is for free, and they don't receive government funding. The Maryland Department of Health will not give them funding because they do not refer or commit for abortions. It's all donations. So what are some ways that you can help? The number one thing is we just want you to take some action. Anything you can do to help, whatever your talent is, we ask you to do that. You know, many people will write a check and donate, but they don't have the time to help. Others have time and talent, but they don't have any extra income to share. So whatever it is you have to give to help support what we're doing in Maryland to try to promote pro-life policies and protect our Constitution and the people that it protects, we welcome and we encourage you to do that. So we try to make it easy for you. On our website, we have a take action page. And it's an automated letter writing campaign. So whenever a bill comes up, like the Privacy Amendment to attack our Constitution, you'll get an email alert and it will tell you, now it's time to send a letter to your elected official. All you need to do is put in your name and address, and the system generates the letter for you. And you can see it, you can read it, you can edit it if you'd like. But really, in 5 minutes or less, you can send a letter to your legislator asking them to defend life. And that's on our Take Action page of our website. Our main website, where you can find everything, it's for Maryland Right to Life. It's MDRTL.org. I'm also going to give you our office number at the end for anyone that doesn't like to use the internet. It's a necessary evil in what I do, but I don't necessarily enjoy it. So this is a group of our grassroots supporters coming out and helping us to testify against a bill in the Maryland General Assembly. This was the House delegates. And this was afterward. You can see how happy everyone is. You know, they gave their time and talent, and we just really appreciate that. We just have some really wonderful people in our movement. Other ways that you can help is that Maryland Right to Life has a booth at the fair. This is part of our education outreach. At the state fair, which starts end of August, beginning of September, right, Julie?
September.
Every year. You'll see us up there in Timonium if you come out. We're usually in one of the indoor buildings, and we hand out educational material. We usually have fetal models so we can show people. This is a 6-week fetus. This is how small the baby is when their heart is fully developed, that kind of thing. And Julie does such a great job with that. So that's one way that you can help is volunteering for a couple of hours at the state fair in Timonium every September. Or every county has their own county fair. If you want to work with a group of people in your area to get a booth, get a pro-life booth together, Julie and I will help you to do that. Just give us a call. We'll bring all the materials and signage and everything you need. And then, of course, we encourage everyone to come out for the marches. It gets a little difficult in January. January 22nd, we go to Washington, D.C., and of course, it's always a blizzard that week. Why do we do it January 22nd? Well, that recognizes the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So, martyrs that we are, we go out there and march in the snow. But we had a great time doing it, and we always have thousands more people than the media reports. But if you'd like to come out, a lot of our community groups organize buses and carpool. So if you're interested, if you give us a call, we can connect you with people in your area that are doing that. We also have the Maryland March for Life. That might be easier to come down to Annapolis. It's on February 3rd. It's still cold, sorry, but we have to do it while the legislators are there. And the legislators either love or hate to see us. But we're always peaceful and we're always hopeful. We have a great group of people. If you want to come out February 3rd, you can contact the information at the end to get more details. Do we have my own time?
You're just at 1 hour now.
Okay, so let's finish up here. I want to make sure you have this abortion pill reversal number. So the chemical abortion pill that I told you about, it is possible to reverse the effects and save the life of your baby if you get immediate medical attention. There are people training all over the country now to provide that care. And through CareNet and groups like Option Line, they connect people with providers that can give the abortion pill reversal. So if you have anyone going through that that's trusted you with the information, these are the people to call, and you'll get this contact information. Maryland Safe Haven Program, again, this conspiracy of silence, women are not getting choices. We passed this in Maryland, where it allows a woman or a girl to safely abandon her baby within the first 10 days if she can't care for it. She can safely abandon that baby to a trusted professional, police or hospital, without any fear of prosecution. So in Glen Burnie last spring, I don't know if any of you heard about it, a baby was abandoned in the woods in Glen Burnie. Thank God, someone walking his dog, I think, came across and heard the baby's cry and was able to save the baby, and the baby survived. But many babies, including Maryland, are not that lucky. So we'll often find babies abandoned in trash cans and other undesirable places, and there's no need. There's no need for it. There's a law to protect mothers to save or abandon their babies. So we need to make sure girls know that. And then finally, we just ask you to be aware of how your legislators are voting on these issues. Maryland Right to Life posts the information. We post a list of all of the bills that we're supporting or opposing on our website. There's a tab at the top that says legislation, but that's something we can walk you through so you can see all the good bills and all the bad bills. But we also do, again, the candidate surveys, and we have a PAC that does that separately from what I do. We do candidate surveys to ask them how they feel about certain life issues, and we do the candidate scorecards where I report to the PAC how the legislators have voted on key legislation, and then we may possibly give endorsements. So right before the elections, the primaries this year are June 5th. If you look on the Maryland Right to Life website, you'll see a list of the candidates that we have endorsed. So I just wanted to let you know, there's a lot that they say about discouraging people from being pro-life, discouraging politicians or candidates from being pro-life. And what we've shown is people are willing to elect pro-life candidates. And in fact, our success rate is 86%, which is very, very good in the political sphere. So the candidates, the pro-life candidates that we have endorsed, 86% have gone on to successful election or re-election. And finally, wanted to make sure for any of the women in the room or any feminists to know that the original feminists were pro-family and pro-life. And this is one of my favorites, Victoria Woodhull. And her quote here is, "The rights of children as individuals begin while yet they remain the fetus. I hold abortion to be just as much murder as the killing of a person after birth is murder." She was the first woman candidate for president of the United States. So I don't know if you heard her name in your women's history classes, but the original feminists were pro-life, pro-family. So this just says, thank you for loving them both. We can love both mothers and their children. We don't have to choose. They don't have to have competing interests when we provide the right support services, and we can. So here's the contact information I wanted to leave you with, just to have this screen up if any of you care to write this information down. Again, we'll share it with you, but that's Julie, who's here with us in the front row, Julie on the right, Julie Biasotti, and then myself here on the left with our board president and our executive director, and our contact information there. So we just encourage you, anything that you want to do to get involved, even if it's just, again, if you support legal abortion, but you think there's some common sense, common ground policies that we can work on together to improve services for women, I'm willing to work with you. So please write down my information. If we have time, I guess I'll take some questions. Do we have time? I don't know where Lori is.
I'm here. If for those who want to stay a little while and ask some questions, please ask them, and if you need to leave, please excuse yourselves.
Thank you so much for anyone who can't stay. I really appreciate your generous time.